All right, folks, welcome to Investing for Beginners podcast. Today, we're going to flip the script a little bit. We have two great listener questions that we're going to answer, and then Andrew and I are going to talk a little bit about how we would handle our first 30 days as a new investor. So, I guess with that, we'll go ahead and dive on in and start with the first question. So, this is hello. I've recently joined and was hoping for some guidance. I have an ISA and a GIA account. My only problem is that the broker I use only allows you to buy full shares, so I have to save every month until I have enough to pay for a chosen stock. Is it better to buy fractions of shares in the GIA account and then sell when I have a full share, transfer the funds to the ISA, and then buy that full share? So great question. And Andrew, do you want to kind of fill everybody in on what the lingo is on an ISA and a GIA, and then we can answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for writing in, Connor. It's a good question. I personally have not dealt with an ISA or a GIA. Going down the Google rabbit hole says GIA stands for General Investment Account. And that was a company in the UK called Aviva had a blog about GIA, General Investment Account. And then ISA, NerdWallet had an article about an ISA. It says you have to be a UK resident to open an ISA. And based on how I'm reading it, it's very similar to the IRAs here in the United States, which are tax advantaged accounts. So I guess the question can kind of be relevant whether you're in the UK or the US. GIA, general investment, general brokerage account, those kinds of things, you don't have any tax benefits. You're going to have to pay taxes when you sell. But hey, that's a good problem because that means you made money. So don't be too sad if you have to pay taxes. But the ISA or the IRA here in the United States, those mean you have some sort of tax advantage. Sometimes you pay tax up front, then you don't have to pay taxes when you sell. All depends on what kind of account you're talking about. Now, when it comes to the question about if you can't buy fractional shares, I don't know what's the case in the UK, but if you're in the United States, please use a brokerage that can buy you partial shares. That's not something that's too hard to find these days. That's where I would go in that regard. And I question why not just put the money in the ISA? Like why go GIA to ISA to buying a share? Like why not go straight to the ISA and then buy the share when you're ready? I don't have the answer to why Connor was talking that way, but that's kind of how I would think about it. What about you?
I would think about it the same way. I think it would be, I mean, there's several ways you can kind of approach it, right? One is you could buy the things you could air quote afford in the ISA, and then the things you air quote can afford in the GIA. But depending on how big each account could get, and if you're starting off with a smaller amount, $100, $200 in each account, not that big of a deal. But let's say that Connor is doing this for the next 20 years and he's got substantial amounts of money in there, then he's going to have a bit of a nightmare / headache with taxes and how he deals with the taxes in both of those accounts. And if he has a lot of dividend payers in the general account, then he's going to get not only taxed on any gains, but he's also going to get taxed on the dividends as well, at least here in the United States. So that could be potentially a problem. And then the other flip side of that is if you try to, I don't know if the account that he has any sort of transaction fees, for example. So let's say that you try to buy stocks in the GIA, the general account, and partial shares, and when they get to air quote full share, you sell that and move it to the ISA and buy the same stock with the money that you transfer. You could have some tax implications. There also could be fees that could be associated with that, depending on what your brokerage is. And I don't know how the taxes work in moving from a brokerage account to a retirement account, but I got to imagine that there's going to be some bigger hit. And then all of that ultimately reduces your return that you're going to get over a longer period of time. And so, yes, generally it's better to be in the market than trying to air quote time the market and wait till you can afford to buy a share. But I would look to see what other options. I know Interactive Brokers is available in England. I honestly don't know if they have fractional shares or not. I believe they do, but you don't hold my feet to the fire because I don't use them, so I can't say for sure that they do. But I know there are other options out there in England, and so I would probably look for a brokerage that would allow me to do what I want to do without having to try to juggle moving money back and forth. I mean, investing is already hard enough without having to put that other part of the equation into it. So I would suggest following Andrew's advice. Wait till you have the money to buy the full share in the ISA. If you want to use the GIA, the general account, as your overflow, then that's fine. Like the article was saying, it can be a great way to invest once you max out the ISA. But I would encourage you to take advantage of any tax advantages you can, because that can be a big hit to your returns, and over a long period of time that can add up. So that would be my advice.
That's great advice. And I don't know if maybe the options are limited and you can't get that fractional share. In that case, look at a lower price ETF, something like a SPY or VTI. Those are two different indexes that you can just buy the ETF, and you don't have to have $3,000 to buy a share of a company like NVR or something,
Right.
where
Yeah.
Berkshire Hathaway
The air
A
shares.
shares. Yeah. So just try to be flexible with that. But I would imagine that there's so many options out there. You can find what you're looking for.
Yeah. Sometimes complexity for complexity's sake is not the best idea. So I would recommend that he's tried to be as simple as he can.
Fun though to try to make it as complex as you can, because then it feels like you're doing good work.
Yeah.
Right?
The harder you make it, it feels like you're accomplishing something, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to the next question that came from in our community at Value Spotlight. And it's a great question. So we were talking about how to analyze companies, whether it's revenues, margins, free cash flow, return on invested capital, anything. How you find who their peer companies or competitors are that you want to compare them to. I mean, a simple example is, okay, if I'm studying Google, I can look at Microsoft or Amazon, for example, or others, and use those as comparisons to see how well Google's doing. But I guess I'd like to hear from the maestro how he kind of builds an industry map is maybe a good way of thinking about it, and what sources he uses to try to start building something like that.
It is a great question, and there's not a all encompassing resource for this. So you do have to be a little bit creative. As it stands, as we record today in 2025, the first thing I would do is I would pull up a website called finviz.com, and then I would put the ticker in. So let's pretend we're going to go back to MVR because we already mentioned that ticker. Let's pretend we're looking at MVR. If you pull that up on Finviz, you would see that they are in the home building industry. So Finviz shows you what sector and then what industry based on how they've classified the company. So in that case, it's super clean and simple. It's a home builder. You can click on the home building industry. It's going to show you a list of companies. Boom. There's your peer list right there. And sometimes it really is that cut and dry. Other times you might get situations where there's multiple business units. Maybe a stock's not really a pure play. Somebody like Danaher, which has become a pure play in life sciences, but in the past would look for businesses that maybe wasn't directly in life sciences, but still provide them an attractive return. So they would buy that business, and now they have multiple businesses under their umbrella. In that case, you're going to have to do a little more sleuthing because the industry might not be correct. Or the industry might also just not tell you much. Sometimes like building materials, I think, is one of the industries on Finviz where you get such a wide range of companies related to home building that maybe this company does the hardware and this company does lumber. It's like, okay, well, that's two completely different things. So in that case, you'd have to do a little more sleuthing. And that's where you kind of have to get into the weeds. I mean, there's a couple tricks that you can save some time in, but there is something to be said for just knowing what the business is, and that helps you more than anything else if you know what that business is. Obviously, we're trying to get to that point, but that's the goal.
How do you how does or how could like primary sources weed into this? Like how could they possibly help?
Yeah, you're thinking like 10Ks and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use a tool called BAMSEC, bamsec.com, to pull up 10Ks, 10Qs, and proxies. And inside of a 10K, some companies, a lot of companies actually, will list their who they believe their main competitors to be. So using our friend Control F, you can go in and start to type the word competitor, and you can sometimes pull up and bam, there's a list right there. Okay, we're a plastics company, we compete against this plastics company, that plastics company, that plastics company. Awesome. And sometimes they even break it out too with different businesses or different segments. Well, we compete against Cisco and Microsoft in this space, but then we compete with Amazon and Google and Microsoft in that space. You see that kind of a thing as well. And so, yeah, Control F can be a great way to find that, and it can be right in the 10K, and you don't have to read all 300 pages to get there because you can use a trick like Control F.
Yeah, that's a great resource. I like using proxies in the
Hmm.
compensation section. They will typically list a grouping of companies that they are using as their peer group to compare performance metrics so that when they're talking about how much they're going to pay their C-suite managers, they can get a reference to, okay, these companies are doing these kinds of revenues, they're seeing these kinds of growth in whatever metrics they're trying to measure, and that is a real easy way because that is exactly what the company they're telling you. These are our competitors, and these who they consider their peers. I like the FinViz one. That's a heck of a lot easier, but I've used the proxy for a while now as a way to find peer groups, and I think it's an easy, clean way to do it. Have you tried using like earnings calls or investor presentations or any of those kinds of things at all?
Investor presentations can be a good one,
Hmm.
and also earnings call slides,
Hmm.
like you said.
Yeah,
Some companies will show, especially if they're the number one in the industry, they might be more forthright with like, "Hey, here's our competitors. We're number one, by the
they can
way."
brag here.
Yeah, our logo's at the top, if you
Yeah.
notice, of this slide deck. That can be a good one too. I used to use Seeking Alpha.
Mm,
They've recently put everything behind a paywall,
right.
which
It's hard.
I don't use them hardly as much as I used to for that reason. Um, yeah, they had a feature where you could click in and then they had a peers tab,
Yeah, I remember
but I
that.
believe that might be on behind a paywall now.
Right.
So unfortunately, that's not available. You can also just straight up Google.
Mm,
Maybe somebody's written something about a company. Maybe they have a Substack, and they've lucky for you, you found an industry map.
mm,
That could be another way as well.
right. I've used all those methods in the past. FinChat, I know, has a section where you can click and it'll show you competitors. The only caveat that I'll put on that is sometimes I don't agree with them. I may know the industry or have some sense of the industry, and I just want to verify or maybe find a name or two that maybe I'm not thinking of. And sometimes it comes up with some really random stuff. I'm like, I don't see how that's connected at all. So, like you're talking about the cloud or something, and then they'll throw in a Walmart. Like, what?
Right,
I don't
right.
I don't know that Walmart has much to do with that, but okay. I think you have to take that with a grain of salt. So I love FinChat across the board, but that particular feature is not as reliable to me.
You do want to double check throughout this entire process. So going back to that idea that you want to have knowledge about the business, understand the business. And really, you don't get that full knowledge, in my opinion, unless you do the 10Ks of not only the company you're interested in looking at, but also who you think their competitors are and
Mhm,
comparing and contrasting that.
mhm.
I mentioned, Control F, you can find competitors. Sometimes a company is not frank about those, but I've found in general smaller companies tend to be more frank about
Mhm.
their competitor list than maybe a big one can.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fault Microsoft for not wanting to list every single
Oh,
little SaaS company that tries to take their small little piece from Microsoft Office.
right.
The smaller names are
Mhm.
definitely looking up and trying to figure out how can they differentiate themselves from the bigger competitors. So
Yeah.
that could be another way to do it. But I completely agree with you. Like you got to know the company
Mhm.
and try to make sure you're not leaning too hard on. I remember one of the mistakes I made early on in my journey was looking at the regular metrics, price to earnings, price to sales, price to book, and then using some stock list I had found online to compare, okay, I'm going to this company versus this company versus
Mhm.
this company, kind of taking that just on face value, like, oh, they must be competitors. Oh, I like this one out of the group without ever thinking about the business model or thinking about what makes these competitors different from each other. And that was a mistake because it's just sloppy. It's
Mhm.
sloppy analysis.
Yeah.
So try to avoid that. I mean, obviously, we're just talking about building the peer list.
Mhm.
And now I'm talking about going to second base and third base
Yeah.
on the whole ordeal. But it is something you want to keep the end in mind as well. So understand that this is first base and then you're going to want to round the
Mhm.
bases to get to home. So make sure you are doing that extra work to double check your
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah. I mean, that's great advice. And I want to kind of double down, whatever, acronym we want to throw on this. The idea of reading other companies' 10Ks beyond Warren Buffett talks about this. I know Andrew's talked about this many times. It's a really, really, really good practice. If you're not already doing it, strongly encourage you to do it for several reasons. One, it gives you a really good idea of the actual industry that you're trying to analyze. So if you are trying to look at a company like AMD or an NVIDIA, don't just read theirs. Also read other companies that are producing GPUs or AI chips or whatever, so you can get better sense of what they're going through and what their managements are saying about opportunities as well as risks as well as potential downsides. And the other added bonus is sometimes you may be thinking, hey, the AMD is the company for me. And then you read something else by another company that you may not have thought of that is part of their peer group. And you're like, whoa, I like this one way better. Like, screw
Mhm.
this one. This is the one. And it's happened to me a few times. I'm guessing it's happened to you by the very strong shake of your head. um,
Yes.
it's a great practice, and it doesn't really add that much more time to your research. And there's so much value you can get from it that will help your primary research immensely. So even though this is not necessarily about peer groups, it's directly connected to getting better investments and improving your knowledge of the sector. It's one thing to just look at the names and go, okay, yeah, I like this one's gross profits better than all these other ones. But if you don't really know how the business works per se, then it's okay information, but it's better information if you actually know, okay, this is why their gross margin is better than this one's because they do this and this, or they account for it differently. And so those are all questions that you can get answered by actually reading their 10Ks. So sorry to say, you got to read a 10K or two or six. It's got to be part of the process. Just has to.
Love that.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, got to read the 10K.
Right. Sorry to say, you got to read a 10K. There's no way getting around it. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. All right, let's move on to our last segment of the day, which is how would Andrew and I treat our 30 days as a new investor after all this time? What do we know now that we wish we knew back then? Kind of thing.
I will tell you the first thing I know now is I would not just wait around before doing something about it. I would not try to read. I mean, it is what it is, right? That's what I did, but I could see myself potentially getting caught up in the reading as much as I can about this before taking the plunge. You want to take the plunge as quickly as possible. And so that means finding a brokerage and opening an account quickly. Like, don't overthink that. There's great brokers. You can pick one and fund your deposit and then buy something, especially if this is just your very first time, and we're not talking about putting your whole life savings into this, but just buying something to get comfortable with the idea of owning a stock, comfortable with the idea of like, oh, I bought something at 130 and now it's at 115. That's kind of a crappy feeling when the first time you felt
Mm.
that and you're not used to it. So yeah, go buy $100 worth of something and see what that process is
Mm.
like. Do that quickly because you can read about it all you want, but there's nothing to substitute for actually going and doing some of that work.
It's amazing how much having some skin in the game, even if it's not air quote a lot of money, changes your mindset immediately. Like you
Mhm.
go from, okay, I got to do all these things before I can invest to you put some money in and then you start to discover like how your mindset works and what I really start to need to know. Like, okay, I bought Amazon just cuz, but now why is it down $15? What happened? Like, and then once you start asking those questions, because you have skin in the game, it's going to be a lot more real to you than some hypothetical exercise that you're just trying to discover the best way to do this. And you can agonize over that for eternity. But I have found that the sooner you put skin in the game, the sooner you start doing it, the more real it becomes and the more serious you're going to take it.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. How do you know what to buy?
Oof. Yeah, I go back to your first investment should be something that you have some familiarity with, in that it's either something you use, i.e., at work or at personal time, or it should be something that you're familiar with. You buy it at the store every day or you subscribe to it, i.e., Netflix. I strongly think it should be something like that because you're going to have more interest in it if you just pick out some rando thing that you read in the Wall Street Journal or heard on the news, somebody talking about this company is up huge and you have no idea who they are or what they do. I would, at least the way I'm wired, I wouldn't, I'd lose interest in it. But if I used Netflix and I liked the service and I invested in it, then I'd be more likely to pursue it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, one of the things we try to preach on this show is buying a stock is really investing in part ownership of a business. And it's hard to invest in something or own something that you don't know anything about. How do they make money? I don't know. It's a black box. Cool. Did I make a good decision? I don't know. Is the stock up or down? We're trying to avoid that whole thing.
Mm.
What's cool about buying something like a Netflix that you might use every day, or buying something like Crocs, which you go to the preschool and see all the kids wearing, is you can generally understand how that business model works. It's not super complex. You pay money to Netflix, they use the money to create shows, and it's a subscription. We can all understand that. And so, to your point, yeah, it helps with the behavior. It helps with feeling like you're doing something that you can slightly understand, even if you're brand new at this. And then it also helps, I think, in the learning process. Learning about picking stocks, if that's a journey you want to go down, is something there's so much to it. And it's really kind of expanding every day as new business models come out and new ways of business are created. I mean, what did AI do to the whole business world and the way that that's changed how a lot of people look at things? Yes, mind blow.
Mm.
So to be able to start at something simple like Netflix, and then it's like, okay, well, I subscribe to Netflix, so I understand what a subscription model is. And so maybe it's easier for me to understand SaaS or subscription as a service. Those type of business models are easier to comprehend because I understand generally because I'm a customer of Netflix. So you just continue adding those Lego blocks to your understanding, and that's how you stay in the game is when you're interested. You got to find things that are just complicated enough where you can grasp it, but not too far away where it's like a huge leap.
Mhm.
You're not going to go from 2 + 2 = 4 to nuclear science overnight. You want to take steps to get there. So I think in learning about stocks, learning about the fact that, you know what, I know I'm looking at my brokerage statement and I know I'm just looking at, is it up a dollar today? Is it down a dollar a day? That's a hard mindset to break. But if you do things, I don't want to say the right way, but do things in the way that will lead you to that, doing something like what Dave's recommending, buying something you already know and can kind of understand the business model, that will lead you down the path towards really true learning and getting better. And that's what you want to do when you're investing. You always want to get better, get better, get better, get better. Because at the end of the day, you're probably going to be an investor the rest of your life. So why not build this skill?
Mhm.
Why not?
Indeed.
It's going to be a skill that you'll take with you for a long time. And so start building on that now. Why wait?
Right. And it doesn't require physical skills. So it's not like playing baseball or playing soccer, right? Where you reach a you reach an age where, you maybe want to keep playing, but the game is telling you you can't anymore. So this is something you can do easy well into retirement if you want. So there's not a lot of physical requirements necessary to be a good investor.
I work really hard to find the best insights I can every single month at Value Spotlight. To see a sample of my previous work, go to stockwriteup.com.
So let's say that we've opened our brokerage, we bought our first company, and we're trying not to look at the stock ticker every single day or 17 times a day. Like where did you start trying to lay the foundation for how can I get better at this every day?
Yeah, great question. One thing I did do that maybe I could have done less of is check that ticker every single day. Apple makes it super easy too, right? Like you open that
Right.
stocks app and they have endless articles you can scroll through and just learn useless information about. One of the things I did do that I do recommend is having like, if we've got our Excel spreadsheet and our laptop and our phone in one hand, have like a good investing book in the other hand, because there's so many good investing books out there that really teach you the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, and what types of investment mindsets you need to have to find repeatable success, repeatable long-term success, not the success that my neighbor two doors down across the street maybe bought Dogecoin in 2022 and now thinks that they know everything about investing. We're talking about sustainable success that through all sorts of markets, all sorts of economic cycles, you can still make money and continue to grow your wealth.
Mhm.
And books are really going to be probably one of the best places to get there, other than listening to us,
Yeah,
of
right, of
course.
course.
But yeah, books are fantastic for
Yes.
that.
Yeah, they're probably unquestionably the best resource to go to. And if you're not a air quote reader, and there are people out there that aren't readers, you have the ability to either listen to them on audiobook, which a lot of people do, or you can also watch videos of people being interviewed that wrote the books, and you can learn a lot from that. If you can't stomach the idea of reading a business book, you can go online and watch Peter Lynch talk for 45 minutes to an hour. There's lots of videos on there. I've put some of them on our Twitter feed, and there's lots of them on YouTube. And you can learn a lot from just watching Peter Lynch talk for an hour. Reading the book is the best, but if reading is just not your thing, there are lots of other options out there to help get you where you want to go. But I 100% agree. Starting to read, starting to find the books that can start to lay the foundation, because you need the blocking and tackling. I know it's not sexy, but you need to understand the blocking and tackling before you can do the sexy stuff.
But you don't understand, Dave. I have a system that has never been thought of before. What do you say to somebody like that who thinks that way?
Um,
Like, I don't need to read a book. I can figure this out on my own kind of a mentality.
I would challenge them to show me how are they going to do that, and what is going to be they have to learn something. They have to learn what a balance sheet is, what an income statement is. You have to learn those things. And I mean, yes, you can pick stocks based on you like the color and the logo, but I don't think that's a sustainable, repeatable method. And so I would challenge them to say, the stock market has been around for a couple hundred years in the United States, and some of the best investors ever use books to learn. It doesn't matter what style it is. they've all used those books to read. Even people that maybe don't necessarily invest, like Benjamin Graham, have all read the book and understand the concepts. They just chose to go a different way, and more power to them. But they still read the book and they still understand the concepts. So I would challenge them to explain to me what their system is and tell me why they think that's better. And then I'll tell them they're
Yeah.
wrong.
Well, the market's tough too because if I go make a mistake in traffic, that's some pretty instant feedback. You
Yeah.
make the same mistake 5 times, you're probably going to get hit,
Mhm.
right? Depending on how egregious the mistake is. In the stock market, 5, 10 years could go by before you realize you made a mistake.
Mhm.
So I know it's hard to bring humility sometimes into a game if you feel like you figured it out, but if you don't bring that humility yourself, the market will bring it for you.
Mhm.
And having the humility to learn from others who have gone before you will preempt a lot of these 5, 10 year mistakes that you probably will have. I mean, yes, everybody gets lucky, everybody has a hot streak. But if you don't learn these lessons and go out and proactively try to learn them, you learn them the hard way. That could take years off of your journey.
Mhm.
And we don't want that to
No.
happen to you. I mean, we like you.
Yeah, we do. We don't want that. We don't want that to happen. Charlie Munger talked a lot about spending time with the eminent dead. And the reason why he's doing that is because despite what everybody always thinks, this time is not different. And
Mm,
things that have happened in the past are repeating again because the circumstances may be different and maybe the technical details may be different, but the way human beings behave has not changed one iota in the last couple thousand years at least. So the fact that we may think that this time is different, it's not, because we humans are involved. And so we will continue to do the dumb things that we do all the time. And so by trying to learn from people that have experienced those mistakes in the past and have learned from them and are giving you advice is a good way to hopefully try to avoid those mistakes in our own investing. And that is why Charlie recommends you read a lot of older books or learn from the eminent dead, people that came before us, because that's how we all learn.
yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Mhm.
And completely agree. So let's say we've got that book in hand. We are following the steps. What is the next thing you would do in your first 30 days as a new investor?
I would try to take, I would do two things. I would take notes on what I'm learning from the book. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can literally write on a piece of paper or go on your Apple phone and type it in notes. And I would start creating in essence, a learning journal of like, these are the things I'm learning. These are the things that I noticed about this, that, or the other thing. And I would just try to keep an open mind and be curious. And I would start also, along with writing down my thoughts, I would also start writing down questions I have, because as I'm reading these books, I'm not going to understand everything. And so I'm going to need to figure out different parts of things, whether it's formulas, whether it's philosophies, whether it's terminology. There are going to be things in there I don't understand. And that's when I'm going to start trying to accumulate knowledge, because knowledge will compound just like a stock will. And so the more that I can learn about what is this return on equity thing? I keep seeing it in Peter Lynch's book, but I have no idea what it is. So then I'm going to go to einvestingforbeginners.com and type in return on equity and figure it out. And so that's what I would do. What about you?
Yeah, that's great. I think learning journal is something that we naturally did
Mhm.
as writers and early day bloggers.
Yes.
That was a great thing that we happened to do
Back in the day.
um, back in the day. There's something to be said about being forced to regurgitate what you're learning,
Mhm.
and that can really cement the. I'm obviously a brain scientist because I know how it can cement all the sparkly things that
Right.
shoot back and forth in your brain.
The neurons and the electrons
Thank
and
you.
everything
Yeah.
firing
Yep.
across our brain. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, it is a great way to do it. And then also, I would add an extension to that is I I mean, do what you want to do, but I enjoy buying one new stock every month. not a new stock, but buying a different stock every month. It could be something you own already or something new. But having that also as a process, as a something you commit to, forces you to keep that learning journey. Because I don't know about you, but I mean, I go through phases of lots of energy about something and then down energy on stuff. And so that's going to be a reality of investing also. Things have been pretty high energy in the market lately. It's been really exciting to see everything. But there are times and months where it's nothing really new in the market and you're not going to have the same kind of activity. And so if you don't have something that's pushing you along consistently time after time after time, you might lose interest and then, oops, I forgot to invest. And then, oops, now I've forgot to invest for 30 years.
Mhm.
So I think having something in place like buying something every month. And then just to add on to what you were saying, Dave, maybe you are also journaling about why you're buying particular things, and that can help your learning process as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. The earlier you can start to build the habit of investing, so doing it, like our friend Braden, I think he says he invests the first Tuesday of every month, and it's something I've
Mm.
tried to kind of replicate, and it just makes it a habit. It's something that you automatically do, and you don't have to think about it too much. You obviously want to think about what you're purchasing, but the actual action of like, okay, I intentionally put money in my brokerage to make a purchase today, or I did it yesterday to make a purchase today, that becomes the habit that you want to form. Because, like you said, if you don't, then 30 years from now, you may not be investing and go, "Ooh." All right, folks. Well, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up today's show. If you have any burning investing questions and you would like to reach out to us and have us answer them on the air, please reach out to us at newsletter@einvestingforbeginners.com, which will be in the show notes. You can also send us questions on Spotify, on the app, when you listen to our podcast on Spotify, as well as on the socials, particularly LinkedIn and the X Machine. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign us off. You guys go out there and invest with a margin of safety. Emphasis on the safety. Have a great week, and we'll talk to y'all next week.